Who would have thought it would come to this? The woman once cradled in the palm of the crown prince's hand was now thrown into a cell like garbage. Yulia couldn't understand it. She was still, in name, his true love. How could they treat her with such cruelty? Randolph stood outside the iron bars, watching coldly, as if the tragedy unfolding before him had nothing to do with him. Yulia tried to argue, her voice weak, insisting she had done nothing wrong. But no one listened. The interrogator lost his patience and demanded a confession. The evidence had been prepared long ago. Yulia reached out with all her strength, grasping for one last thread of hope. But the man who once claimed to love her didn't even turn to look at her. Randolph walked away without hesitation, his footsteps echoing down the corridor, each one announcing that Yulia had been utterly abandoned by the world. The warmth of the past and the coldness of the present were now two entirely different worlds. Her family never came. Her friends never showed up. She lost track of how long she'd been locked away. Just as she felt she couldn't endure anymore, the cell door swung open. A masked guard ordered her out. Heavy shackles bit into her wrists as she was dragged barefoot to the execution ground, each step leaving a trail of blood. From the high platform, the verdict rang out across the square. She was accused of trying to poison Crown Prince Randolph and of conspiring to overthrow the kingdom. The law called for death, but to humiliate her further, they staged a public execution. The guillotine's blade already hung above her as she was strapped to the platform, with no chance of reprieve. Randolph watched from above, as indifferent as a stranger. Beside him, Vera hid a triumphant smile behind her fan. Only as the blade fell did Yulia finally understand. She had been betrayed, set up by that very woman. She looked at Randolph one last time, too consumed by grief and injustice to even speak. Then came a deafening sound, and everything dissolved into darkness. She braced for endless cold. Instead, a familiar voice called her name. Yulia's eyes snapped open. She was lying in a warm bed, and her maid Amy, looking strangely young, stood before her. What was happening? Hadn't the moment of death already passed? Yulia looked down at her hands, now small and childlike, and realized the truth. She had been reborn, carrying the memories of her past life back to the very beginning. She called out for a mirror, and when Amy brought one, Yulia froze. The round, childish face staring back at her was unmistakably her own from years earlier. She remembered the guillotine clearly, the blade falling, and yet here she was, truly returned to a time before the tragedy had begun. But before she could feel any relief, the horrors of her past life came flooding back. Randolph's cold stare, Vera's triumphant smile. Unable to bear it, Yulia clutched her head and screamed for help. Amy, terrified, ran to fetch her father, fearing something evil had possessed the child. Overwhelmed by grief and fury at having been abandoned in her past life, Yulia screamed for everyone to leave. In her memories, no one had stood up to save her at the guillotine. The intensity of her fear and rage overwhelmed her, and she lost consciousness again. When she woke, a kindly old man sat by her bed. She recognized him, Dr. Barron. Her outburst had clearly frightened the household, but she no longer knew who to trust. Examining her, Dr. Barron found nothing physically wrong with her magic, but her mental state was far more troubling than any loss of magical control. The horrors of her past life coiled around her like a snake, and she felt as though she were suffocating, wanting only to disappear. Just as she seemed on the verge of collapse, Dr. Barron used magic to calm her spirit. Had he waited any longer, the consequences might have been severe. Watching her sleep, Dr. Barron was troubled. The Duke and Duchess barely had time for their child, but there was no sign of outright abuse, so what could account for such despair in a 3-year-old? He had practiced medicine for decades and had never seen anything like it. Something was clearly weighing on her, something far beyond what a child her age should carry.